evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. I'm your host, Luinda Bazoka. Today with me in the studio is our Russian mafia, our co-host and the man behind the figures, Mr. Nohan Japao. How have you been?
I've been okay. Good evening, viewers.
How has been the week?
The week has been okay. Just keeping up to date with the news, what's going on around the world. Work has been tiresome, of course, but everything is on track. So
today we are discussing a very nice topic, very, very interesting topic. We are discussing economic diplomacy and national economic development. Our guest today is a person that needs no introduction. He saved, I won't mention his journalistic path. I'll just mention things that are very relevant to what we are discussing today. He served as press aide to former President Edgar Chagwa. He also served before that as Deputy High Commissioner at our mission in London under then President Michael Sata. So this is a person that comes with huge experience. This is a person that not only brings to the program his wealth of knowledge in terms of economic diplomacy and diplomacy at large, but he also brings a lot of experience in terms of how government functions and how citizens can participate in national economic development. Mr. AMOS CHANDA, good evening.
Good evening, Doc. Good evening, Japan.
Good evening.
Thank you for accepting to come and appear on our program at short notice. Many people do not know that me and Mr. AMOS are actually quite close.
Yes, very close.
Yeah, in the professional line of things, and I give great respect to Mr. AMOS. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to give you a chance to call in, to send your messages. I'm sure you can see the lines, the numbers below your screen. We are going to open the phone lines, prepare your questions, participate. This is a program that is interactive. We interact with the viewers and with our guests. Now, before we go in and dissect economic diplomacy, national economic development, and give you a brief history and also how citizens can participate in national economic development and how international relations are very important to national economic development, we are going to turn to the numbers man, Mr. Nohan Japao, to give us a brief feel of what the markets are saying, especially now that we have a lot of talk around Russia, Ukraine, and NATO. Mr. Japao, over to you.
Okay. So the market update, as usual, we'll start with our exchange rate. Okay. The kwacha against the dollar today was selling at 17 kwacha, 96 ngwe. The pound was selling at 24 kwacha, 3 ngwe. The euro was trading at 19 kwacha, 19 ngwe. The rand was trading at 1 kwacha, 18 ngwe. Then we move to the selected metal prices on the LME. Aluminium closed off selling at $3,605 per ton. That's an upward movement of 3.13% upwards. Then the copper was trading at 10,257.50 cents. That's an upward movement of 2.82% upwards. Zinc was trading at $3,927 per ton. Lead was trading at $2,433.50. That's also an upward movement of 0.85. Tin was trading at $46,150. That's an upward movement of 0.33%. Nickel was trading at $27,000. That's an upward movement of 6.09%. Then we move on to the crude oil prices. The WTI crude was trading at $109.08. That's a downward adjustment of 0.73%. Then the Brent crude was trading at $113. That's an upward movement of 0.8%. 0.08%. So today we added another slide. So we're going to be looking at selected building materials. So for cement, 50 kgs, going at 140 kwacha. Paint, PVA, 20 liters, going at 450 kwacha. I beg your pardon. Roofing sheets, 0.4 millimeters. That's per sheet. 120 kwacha. Building sand, 20 ton, 2,500. Quarry, 20 ton, 2,200. Timber for 150 by 50, 5 meters, 220 kwacha. A door, 600 kwacha. Toilet seat, 1,800 kwacha. Bathtubs, for one, 2,200. Sewer pipes, 6 meters, 285. Towels, a box, going at 300. That's all we had for you on the market updates today.
So you can see that the building materials are going up high. I can see. Of course, we got the average prices, but I remember some time back we used to buy cement at 48 kwacha. Now it has moved to over 140.
140.
I hope salaries have moved.
They recently moved.
So we go down into the topic of discussion. With which question are we going to start with?
I think I'm sure everyone knows our guest, but I think he can explain a bit about himself to the viewers.
Who is AMOS CHANDA? I'm sure the people just know AMOS CHANDA from what they read in the press, but who is AMOS CHANDA?
Yes, thank you very much, the two presenters. I think that I'll start from where I ended, then go back to where it all began. My main point of exposure in the public domain was my journalistic practice at the Zambia Daily Mail, and later on with international foreign wires as correspondent for many different ones in Australia, UK, South Africa. And during that time, I was an analyst for the main reporters that the international wires would send, and I was reporting on commodities. That's why my inclination, even in journalism, although the political journalism side of it was highlighted, I did a lot within the economic journalism, following markets, analyzing trends and commodities. So I did quite a lot of that. Then I was on the diplomatic desk for a very long time within the Daily Mail, and later on I went to diplomatic school. Later on I went to law school to add up to some of the things that I did. Then I worked in London as press secretary, and towards the end of my time there as Deputy High Commissioner for a brief period, then press secretary for the president. But I was in President Sata's State House as deputy press secretary for 9 months. That's one part of my history that many people did not know. And Mr. Sata assigned me mainly to work with the trade unions, the British High Commission, the European Union, and mainly was to understand the business side, to present him as a business-friendly president, contrary to what they thought about him. And then I think that in a very short time, we did succeed to clearly tell them where he stood. He was a social democrat who wanted government to deliver for the poor, but he also strongly believed in property rights for citizens, that the state must not disempower a private citizen if he has acquired property correctly. He wanted successful, efficient businesses, but he also wanted value addition that cascades down to the people. So to that extent, he deployed me to be part of his public diplomacy team that would create a useful intersection of politics and business. And then very quickly, that's what he tasked me to do, even in London.
Okay, so you've gone to a diplomatic school,
Yes.
Sat on a diplomatic desk, interacted with the trade unions, reported on international trade.
The mines as well.
Yes. So that leads me to a question: can diplomacy add value to the economy, or what is diplomacy's role?
In fact, economic diplomacy is public diplomacy, simply put. It is that diplomacy that seeks to get the frontline international political exercise of one country as it engages with another and other institutions to try and bring economic benefits to the country. So diplomacy, in that respect, is not the job of the Minister of Foreign Affairs alone. It's not the job of the President alone. It's a job of every citizen. I think the Americans, the Americans' type of public diplomacy, the entire diplomatic exchange, they invest more in public diplomacy, and at the front of it is actually economic diplomacy that they do. Things that will sell America, the dollar, and even freedom and prosperity, as I said, it's part of the package of how diplomacy can bring economic benefits to citizens. Within the Zambian diplomatic architecture, you have the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs as a front line there, which is why at some stage maybe I may comment on the controversy about how many trips is good enough for the President to be considered to be traveling too much or not too much. Unless you are part of the President, Minister of Finance and Minister of Foreign Affairs, you may not fully understand why probably a trip to Katima Muliro might be more important than a trip to the United States or vice versa. Who determines how valuable a trip is? Maybe the government must come out more proactive and say some of these things. If the Zambian people knew how much we spend to sustain the Zambian diplomatic machinery, probably they would riot. But unless you explain to them what they mean, that the expenditure is worth the benefits that you are getting in the new world order of interconnectivity, the competition is so stiff. You have to stay at a front end of everything in order for you to be
so we need to look at the outcome of or the benefits that the trip will yield at the end.
Yes, which is why I was very quickly saying that I've seen the emergence of debate about whether President Lungu traveled aimlessly or whether this president in the first 6 months exceeding the record of President Lungu in his first 6 months. Then I've heard a lot of explanations about, no, these ones are useful, they are not. Who can tell? Maybe the president can tell, the foreign minister can tell, the press secretary can tell, because if some of these things were not state secrets, I would tell you, but I can tell you that there were some of the trips that looked so useless, that they were so useful in terms of the gain in there. A decision of one president versus sitting with another in 10 minutes in physical summit rather than by phone produced a lot than what can be get. Yeah, look, with the technology that we have, you can see the video, the virtual connectivity. What is the use of summit? Why are summits still within the context of international relations and diplomacy?
Exactly.
Because there is something that can only be achieved with a combination of both voice, body language, and just the meeting of two people, one president against the other. So, how do you determine the value of these trips? This is part of economic diplomacy. But I think that what has been missing is the visible benefits coming on their own, or a clear explanation for those who are tasked to explain what these trips are all about.
I don't know whether this is the right forum for me to mention, but during my time as EAZ president, remember the time of sales tax.
Yes.
You and me found ourselves in a certain country.
Yes.
And probably facing people that were very cardinal to to investments in Zambia. So how can we find a way to explain to citizens such the importance of diplomacy? Because a lot of people think countries are isolated, and what happens within the nation is more important than engaging other countries. I mean, we have seen classic diplomacy going on around Ukraine, Russia, the USA, the European Union involved. But I think what people do not know, that there's much more to that than just a country entering into another country. There are a lot of economic variables.
Yes.
So how do we find a way to...
Yes, as I said, in the scheme of things of a highly globalized world order that we have, you've got to understand that public diplomacy is not a function of government alone. When you talk about the mining endeavor that we attended that time, 2017, 2018, you have the entire mining industry deciding that this is not a country to go to, and then they peg the presentation that the entire global mining industry was there, and the country was going to be represented as unfriendly, high taxes, a prohibitive sales tax in the offing. The government, the Minister of Mines alone wouldn't have managed. So the government then engaged the Economics Association of Zambia. That part of your mandate was to explain this thing, and therefore you found yourself on the government delegation to go and engage in economic diplomacy. Not to governments, but to the captains of industry in the mining industry. In there, when the trajectory of copper mining, cobalt, when everything was showing that the commodity prices were going to go up, they tried to make the country look extremely unattractive because the narrative had been decided that this is what it will be. So it's a combination of actors within the private sector, the government sector, and the need to explain that the geopolitical play out, you might see guns going, but at the surface, beneath the surface there, you see that it's a competition for economic gain going in there. If nuclear weapons are placed on the border between this country, will it affect business? It's a whole complex of ideas that are rarely communicated. So communication is extremely important, and at every stage, those who are in government, they should not tire from explaining and explaining and explaining. That is the success or failure of economic diplomacy. It lies in presence in the media and explaining why this action differs from this one, why this option was better than this option. Everything in journalism, actually, in the first day you go in there, you are taught that economics is politics and politics is economics. Wars and everything are fought over economic value.
So does an ordinary citizen have a role to play, apart from the role that is played by government officials or economic commentators? Does an ordinary citizen have a role to play in how, let's say, in diplomacy, on how a country is looked at?
Yes, extremely important. In fact, if you look at the British system, the American system, it's the ordinary citizen, the American Peace Corps, the volunteers under the British Council and all that. So ordinary citizen, the voices of ordinary citizen sometimes go deeper than the voice of government, which people think is structured and spinned to produce a certain result. But to galvanize that opinion, government must take the lead, and institutions such as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as I said, Ministry of Finance, State House, and all other agencies must be able to galvanize and shape that opinion and get it to the public. So every citizen has, for instance, the fight against corruption is genuine, and every country must make sure that corruption is kept at the bare minimum. But if you present the country as excessively corrupt, for instance, Zambia's for some time was $28 billion GDP. And for those of us who worked for the president and whose job was it was to communicate, when you sat down sometimes over a period of 2 days and say, maybe this thing they're talking about is true, and you are looking at the numbers of money that has been lost to corruption in that 1 year, maybe it's twice the size of the GDP. You cannot steal what is more than available. So if you paint the country, for instance, as what is the most important thing in Zambia is corruption, the public and economic diplomacy machinery, when people are looking at it abroad, that's what pops up. So yes, you can fight corruption, but don't degrade the country so that it is looked at in that fashion. There are countries where the civil wars have been endemic. The wars are as old as the countries themselves. But the way you market the country goes to show whether you succeed in public diplomacy or not. I think I must welcome the decision of the SEC to announce that they are slowing down in making announcements when they are investigating people. Because those investigations must go on, respecting the dignity of the person you are investigating and also protecting the integrity of the evidence. Because if you go public in the manner they've been doing in the past, first of all, you create the country as nothing but a theater of corruption. And that is all that is happening. I think that when I heard that, I said, yeah, I think we are going in the right direction. If you've seen in the last 2 weeks, there's some kind of stability and that the country can go on. Investigations on murder can go on, but you can't create, for instance, if there's a murder in Mukushi, Kasama, and then you paint a picture that murder cases are happening across the country. You are damaging the image collectively of the country. And when the players in the economic diplomacy sector abroad are looking at the country and crunching the numbers and direction on where to take foreign direct investment, those irresponsible public mentions can harm the economy.
Okay.
Yeah, yet the ultimate goal of fighting corruption is to make the country attractive, that investors can feel safe.
That's very true, because when we saw, when we had, when there was that change of government, it seems we had a lot of people gain interest in our financial securities,
yes,
government bonds and
yes,
everything, and we saw our economy kind of improve.
I've been, when I was years as president, I was bombarded left and right and center for me saying, you know what, not that we should stop discussing the economy, but let's discuss it with dignity. Yeah. Let's not destroy our country.
That's what I'm talking about.
I think even some media outlets started posting cartoons of shh, don't talk about the economy, the kwacha is going to lose value. But having known how government operates through my various interactions with, first of all, the private sector, the mining investors, the agriculture sector, manufacturing, interacting with government itself, from the presidency to the shop floor worker, interacting with diplomats, both East and West, I noted that the type of information that people have, they would rather believe what is being written on Facebook than what government issues as the truth. And because I understood one or two things, I noticed that especially dignitaries were very much convinced on things, certain things that were happening. Unfortunately, this narrative has even continued up to today. You hear about the $50 million fertilizer scandals or what. Whether that is true or not, people outside the country, they believe it. Yes. Because those things are never written in Botswana, for example. Yeah. You mentioned about the country that is doing good things, but they have been at war. Yeah. I can point out Israel. In Israel, you can be walking in Tel Aviv and just see loud smoke in the air, and the guide will tell you, oh, that is our missile intercepting another missile, the Iron Dome intercepting Palestinian missiles. Said, but there's a war. Say, I don't worry about that.
It's taken care of.
It's taken care of. So you can buy this, you can do this. Yes. And you never hear them talk ill about the country. But when they're in the Knesset, their parliament, they will be fighting each other politically and what. But when it comes to Israel, so Where do we start from as a country? Do we retrain our citizens?
Yes, we need, remember I characterize economic diplomacy as public diplomacy. We must first of all, as a country, I think we must fix the politics. Our politics are broken. And I was coming here and you promised that you are not going to draw me into politics. But I think that it's inevitable. Our politics are broken and we must fix that. If the UPND, wrongly or rightly, criticize what they call excessive trips by the president of no economic value, President Lungu, and I will say this using an anecdotal experience, and at that time it looked untenable. I said, in a mocking way, in the unlikely event that the UPND formed government, they will understand that it is absolutely necessary for the president to travel. I said then. I think that what I said has happened. They have said the president's trips are necessary. Now, do we want the PF to go through the same mistakes that the UPND made when they are in opposition, because they have adopted the criticism in the same manner the UPND adopted it? That's why I'm saying the politics are broken. If the UPND was wrong, should the PF sleepwalk into that path, on that path of, no, we must be able to now reach a bipartisan agreement on certain things that matter. That if the president is a front-run performer, is a chief marketing officer for the country, and the trips we said then were necessary under President Lungu, how can it be sensible that we can say that they are not? If we agreed that the economic and social rights in the Constitution must be enshrined in the justiciable part of the Constitution where economic and social rights are enforceable, and therefore we must have a referendum, but we put it in the general election that was toxic and bound to be disputed. If we agreed then that was correct, shouldn't we now have a bipartisan agreement that when we were in opposition, we supported this, and you are in government, you opposed it, but we understand that it's correct? Can't we have a bipartisan bill go to Parliament and agree on certain? So if there is agreement at the height of the country, which is politics, in the realm of politics, we don't have to agree on everything, but there are broad themes where we need to agree. That for instance, if it was wrong for the UPND, and I think they were wrong, to criticize Mr. Sata's massive infrastructure development in the education sector, how can it not be right for them to say he was right to build schools? In fact, there isn't enough classrooms because of the free education policy. Shouldn't they be admitting that he was right? But should the PF continue now to criticize the UPND for the free education policy? The excessive numbers of pupils we are seeing in school now as a result of free education is indicative of the problem that we draw underground. And we appeared to be normal with it, that we were admitting enough numbers of children in school, but they were not going because of not paying. So shouldn't we now have a bipartisan agreement that building schools then under Mr. Sara and Mr. Lungu was a correct thing? That in fact, if those schools were not built, the overcrowding we are seeing would be worse. But why should the PF now criticize that? Why should the UPND not agree that in fact we were wrong? Those are the broad themes I'm saying we must agree. We don't have to agree on everything, but there are certain things that are a matter of national development. So if we fix our politics, I think even the public diplomacy, economic diplomacy aspects we are talking about, citizens will now be empowered. I think in our time, I was talking to the principal of Even on College, and we are lamenting at the low levels of enlightenment, particularly among journalists, because we're saying they should be at the front line of knowledge because they deal with information. Then Mr. Fwambo told me that in our time, he thought in our time, political education wasn't there. In fact, I reminded him that I think we are lacking political education. And this must start. Political education does not mean teaching children politics. It's awareness, national awareness on common values that build us as a nation. If police was acting in the manner some law enforcement agencies act, Zambia would have been characterized as a murderous country, because police will arrest people every day for murder, defilement, but you hear indictments in court. Some of them are not even reported on, because that's how society functions. So we must be able to agree on broad themes. Oh, okay, if this is wrong, then there will be this national awareness I'm talking about, the political education, because it was couched within the UNIP era. Some people think that you're trying to bring the humanism ideology. No, there are certain things that are required as a matter of what I'm calling political education. That's what informs public diplomacy. That's what informs the so-called economic diplomacy. Unless there is broad consensus on certain issues, what you are saying, Doc, will not happen. Yes, we must be able to re-educate the young people, including people with degrees in universities. That look, the country functions like this. There's a common denominator where we must agree that giving fertilizer to farmers is a good thing. That if it is good under President Mwanawasa, it must be good under President Banda, under President. Yeah. The peasants produce the most. So we must agree whether 12 bags is okay, or 8 bags, whether subsidies on fuel and all that. All this, the sum total of all these forms what we call economic diplomacy, how the country presents itself. The success of Rwanda is a case of a very successful program of public economic diplomacy, where the country has united and shaped a narrative. But of course, in countries that are less democratic, sometimes it's easier to achieve certain goals.
Well, from what you are saying, I've picked one thing that I'm one of those people that are very critical to both President Sata's and President Lungo's governments. I'm sure you being there,
yes, we are taking note.
You know how critical I was until I was introduced and probably given more information
yes.
about how government
function. I was playing the role of public diplomat,
yes.
Giving you, if this is wrong, I come back. If this is correct, unedited and censored, I will say, look, as Economics Association, look at this and this and this. The fundamentals in the economy are okay. We think there's a manipulation of the currency. Then that's a re-education I'm talking about, that we must go beyond professional associations, deep into preschool and all that.
So when you know, maybe the only good thing that I got from EZ is the ability to understand how government functions. When information is laid out to a human being, and now you go to educate the citizens to say, you know what you are talking about in terms of exchange rate, some of it we are being manipulated by business people.
Yeah.
But people will say, no, it's just a failure. Maybe this decision that has been made is because of this that happened, but citizens don't. And I think, from my view, is that we lack that ideology as a country. You know, in terms of economic diplomacy, I've lived a conscious life, maybe a rational life. I can remember KK's economic agenda, not from the books, but I remember how he was running the country, and all of us, how when Manda, you know, is moving on the road, we don't stop because there's a vehicle carrying a dead body. Now that was being, I don't know where that came from, but those are doctrines that were being taught to us, to say you need to respect the dead. But today when you visit, for example, graveyards, they will even be stepping on the grave of a you know, freshly buried person. That is one. Two, the national anthem and what. So how do we now bring this awareness? Because to be very honest, at a certain point, maybe 2 years ago, I even said, I think it's pointless to try to help the country understand where we need to go. To a level whereby, if somebody came for investment advice, I would tell them, if you are coming to Zambia, do not invest in a business that requires over 5 years for you to recoup your investment. Because when a new government comes in, should the new government come in, you are going to be labeled as a person from the previous regime, and your things will be confiscated. Same as what is happening in the West. It's quite unfortunate that assets of oligarchs are being frozen or confiscated. Now you think that me, when I become rich, I'll go and invest in those countries. I won't, because precedents have been said that you can grab my property.
Yes.
Now, that precedence is also coming within the Republic, that, you know, you can, your property, you can lose it.
That is extremely important, and you and I, our deep friendship notwithstanding, we differ on ideological standpoint. I'm on the liberal side of things, but I emphasize property rights as inviolable, and I lean on the economic theory of free market economy. I fully support, because I think that markets, freedom and enterprise will regulate society better than the heavy hand of the state. Those are my core beliefs. But you ought to understand that the core values, entrenched protection of property rights, must be there, so that when the government changes, a successful businessman within this PF government shouldn't worry about who becomes president, because if you have invested and you have followed the law, you shouldn't worry about. There must be guarantee of perpetual succession. It is enshrined in the Constitution and in the Lands Act and everywhere. When those things are not there, this is what makes our ideological standpoint very weak. When the government has been elected, like UPND, which deals on the liberal economic market, but it shouldn't make those who believe in the command economy feel like Zambia is not their country. No. The exchange of power between the Democrats and the Republicans just changes the players on the scene. The fundamentals of what makes the state remain the same. At 12 hours every 4 years on January 20, the Secret Service changes royalty to who they protect. It's a seamless, entrenched mechanism that perpetuates the success of that country. If the Prime Minister in England loses the majority in the Commons, it's obvious the majority leader will go and visit the Queen and they will be granted permission to form government. And the DPP will remain in office. I mean, the Attorney General in England is a politician, goes. The DPP remains in office. All the key officers remain there, apart from ministers who goes with the Prime Minister. So the inviolability of the state, as it were, must be guaranteed, that the state will function. And those are nuclear powers. When there is a change of Prime Minister, there is nothing that actually makes people on the streets of London frightened that the guy whose fingers it is on the nuclear button no longer has power. The change is seamless. Theresa May never went to the country to win power. Cameron resigned. The Conservative Party, the majority party, elected a Prime Minister of a phenomenally powerful country, and she went and asked the Queen that I'm the majority leader, and she was Prime Minister. And the nuclear arsenal was intact. There was no panic on the street. It's not that those values and that success, that capability exists only in the Northern Hemisphere. We can have it. We have a very resilient state machinery that can outlive individuals. But as you were saying, there are these shaky things. The example you give about Israel, a rocket flying would make us company. But this is exactly what the country must be. It must be able to outlive all of us. I was in State House, I've left, another individual must go in. You EAZ president, an institution mustn't die. If they die, those are weaknesses which we must be able to cure. So that institutions should be able to outlive individuals. Businessmen, they are no PF judges. They shouldn't be UPND judges. They shouldn't be socialist party. No, judges of the High Court are judges of the High Court. I hate somebody. No, PF judges. You are destroying institutions. Those are, if any other institution must collapse, the judiciary mustn't, because that is our last bastion of hope as citizens. But when you have people in government or in the previous government giving a label to a judge as a PF judge or a UPND judge, where does it leave the confidence of a citizen who must appear? Should we now investigate whether I'm appearing before a UPND judge or a PF judge or a DP judge. No, those are institutions that must outlive political parties.
Okay. So we've talked about continuity of good biases, good practice, continuity of good things.
Yeah.
Now that leads me to think that we should actually have a national economic diplomacy strategy that can go on from government to government, where we can actually exploit not even just opportunities that we find or we can get from the West or East, just even what opportunities we can have from around us, our neighbors, where we say this is our strategy and this is what we stand to gain around us.
Before you go further, before I lose this point, it must start from one of the most controversial points of the political campaigning, the entire 5 years of the PF government, when the issues of debt were a matter of controversy. We must have a national economic diplomacy strategy, as you say, so that if one Minister of Finance says our national debt is 12 billion, there must be national consensus at 12 billion. So that international investors can have confidence that the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Zambia cannot tell a lie. But the amount of lies, the amount of skepticism, the amount of doubt we created in the international financial markets was that you didn't know whether the international debt, foreign debt, was 12 billion. We didn't know whether it was 18. We know if it was. There was a time when somebody said it was 90 billion. One of the most successful developments, events, one of the most important events across the change of power from PF to UPND is that, in fact, the current Minister of Finance confirmed that the debt was 12.9. That credibility is not for Minister Mutate or Minister Mwanakatwe or Minister Walyangande or Minister Musogotwane. It's the credibility of the country that if one Minister of Finance tells you that our maturities are up to this level, our local debt is this, there must be consensus that that is the truth. What reputation remains of the country where the international lenders can't believe that the Minister of Finance is telling the truth? We can have disagreements, but we cannot have disagreements on things that are so fundamentally critical to the success of the country, such as even the acceptance of what our national debt is. But there we are. Now, picking up from there, this is what I'm saying. We must be able to perpetuate good things and create a people now believe when Minister Musogotwane has left and probably Yari Kalava's party forms government, Yari Kalava's Minister of Finance should be able to state that what Minister Musogotwane said is correct. We are increasing the credibility of the country rather than the credibility of Minister Musogotwane. But again, as I was saying, the politics are broken. There is reluctance from within the circles of the PF to affirm what Honorable Musogotwane is saying as a position. So if they were wrong, should we also walk in the wrongs of the UPND in opposition? Maybe because the UPND only has 2 experiences. The PF was 3. 23 years in the opposition and a few months in government. The PF maybe has the most balanced experience. 10 years in the opposition, 10 years in the opposition, in government, and they've begun a new term in the opposition. Maybe they should be better positioned to guide the country about the key themes where we must be agreed on. I mean, even when we have agreed that certain things must be kicked in the long grass so that we deal with the urgent things of floods or not, even how to kick the can down the road, we disagree even on how to disagree. What sort of a country are we building? Yes, there is a cyclone storm here. It has created so many volumes of water to flow down, and therefore we should be able to agree that the weather forecast is correct, that this is a natural catastrophe, this is incompetence of government, this is corruption. We cannot disagree on everything. And then I'm not saying that the UPND must not be held accountable for the things they did in the opposition. I'm just saying, is it sensible to walk in the path of wrong just because the ones in government now are there? Or is it sensible for those who are now in government to continue to deny that this? So the point I'm making is that let's select what we can agree on. Let's select what we can disagree on. Those things that are fundamental. Britain is a Western liberal democracy, a market economy. But within that free market economy, we have a welfare state where education and health are free. What happens when you have an educated citizen? You have a much more sophisticated population that can drive the economic diplomacy, which is a subject of this discussion. So let's agree that access to free education is a good thing. Let's also agree that let's build more schools. Let's have certain things agreed and pack them, move on to the next one. Should we have a 7-year term for one president, as Honorable Murusa one time brought in? Is 5 years enough? Yes, I can tell you that it's enough for a president to come back and say, I've done 5 years. Should we agree that a transition period is like this? All those things we can fix. I think we can fix the constitution well ahead of elections. Let's not do it when elections are there so that the polarization is there. So yes, I agree totally that we must be setting in place a national strategy for economic diplomacy that speaks to the interests across political lines.
Well, when you look at what you have said, so what I'm picking out is institutions.
Institutional memory.
Institutional memory should be there, and institutions should be very strong.
Yes.
We need to know that this is a public sector, private sector, academia, and one of the issues that I've noticed in Zambia is that politics is now number one. Even when you post a photo of a car moving because you like the photo or you like a plane, they will tell you, no, you are saying that we should buy these planes. Why didn't you buy these planes when you were in government? Then I say, first of all, I've never been in government. So there's that sense of, the sense of being Zambian is not there. There's the sense of belonging to a political party. And when there's discourse, there's always these two and back and forth. So how can we create our, like the Americans, they'll tell you, I plead the Fifth Amendment, I plead this. No, under this I can carry a gun. No, me, remember in the Constitution, and the Constitution is over 200 years old. So how can Zambia do it now? Who's the best, who are better placed? Because in Zambia we don't trust each other.
No.
And the opposition, they will never trust each other. Now I'm hearing that teachers, civil servants now are being victimized to say, you are PF, you should leave. Should we also start saying, okay, you are PF, don't pay tax because you have to leave? So if a person has to leave, does it mean that they should be paying taxes on one hand? They have to pay tax to the nation? So what should we do? Who should drive this whole agenda so that maybe we can sit, and we call it a meeting at I don't know, it's Mpundu tree that occurred in Chirundu, where our children and their children will say, no, we can't do that. Our ideology as a country is this. This is where we want to go. Like what happens in China, they have the Communist Manifesto. They know where they want to place China in the next coming years. But in Zambia, you remember there was a nuclear project that began. Yes. Why? Because the previous government identified that we didn't have enough power. The load sheddings, and they wanted to grow production of copper to over 3 million. The new government has come in, they are saying they want 3 million, but they have forgotten that there's a power
as a
issue.
Condition precedent.
Yes, and there were steps that were begun, the nuclear, whatever, and all those things. But because, so how can we bring sanity to all this?
It's the president. The amount of power in the president is that is the best position person to put together a broad-based agenda that speaks to the broadest interests, non-partisan interests of the nation. We must be able to create those points of consensus I talked about. But within those dynamics you must understand. For instance, yes, we have agreed that copper is a mainstay, and we must produce enough of it in order to sustain the economy. And enough of it is 3 million target. The nuclear power plants were underwritten by the Russians. We have voted against them in an important, they don't forget these things. You see, the national politics is so interconnected to international. You probably must say, okay, we may not have the nuclear power plant built by the Russians now, but you need nuclear power. Nevertheless, you can get it from China. You can get it from the UK. The point I'm making is that both the PF and the UPND agree that for the maximum gain from the country's most important resource, unless you produce it at 3 million tons. Let's move on. Now we get there, is that the condition precedent is the availability of enough power in order to drive the mines to reach that stage. So there is consensus there. How we do it is how we fulfill this condition precedent. I'll give another example. I think by now President Hichilema understands fully that, that trip to Saudi Arabia, partially, the King Salman Saudi's hospital in Chalal is a product of that, because I saw him inspecting it.
Yes. Yeah. The trip that people continue laughing at.
They were laughing at the trip. Yeah, that was done there. The president was going to the Middle East, in Dubai to be specific. Clearly, he must have been briefed about the presence of the Saudis within the discussion. So he had to flag up one of the major points of interaction between them. So that women and children's hospital will not treat only PF or UPND. It's a hospital as a result of an aggressive economic diplomacy program then.
I think around that time when President Lungu went to Saudi Arabia, after that I was part of the financial working group for the nuclear power plants. Yes. First it was the research reactor. So I was privileged to travel with the then late Secretary to Cabinet, Dr. Msiska. So we went to Austria. And of course that was none of my business, because we attended the International Atomic Agency General Assembly. That is basically the General Assembly of the United Nations, now the branch that deals with nuclear energy. So there was a resolution where Arab countries had sponsored to condemn Israel, and to not to condemn, but to make Israel account for the amount of nuclear weapons that they have, and to send in inspectors. I remember Iran speaking. It was a very heated, that was a General Assembly, and I was there, I attended. And when it came to voting, of course, me, I was very far because I went for other things. Zambia abstained. And I was wondering, why has Zambia abstained? You can't even make a stance on such an issue. Later in the evening, I realized that these things are interconnected.
Yes.
One, there's a trip to the Middle East that the president undertook, and we are looking for investment from the United Arab Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, and one. So if you vote for, they will like it, because those are Arabs. They are supporting each other. But you are going to hate the Israelis. The Israelis who are also looking at bringing clean and smart agriculture into Zambia, drip irrigation and all those things. Then, who are backed by the US and the British. So if you vote against the Israelis, you have crossed the path. So the best way to do is just to abstain. And you know, just before I lose this, what was very interesting was that there's a country, I don't know whether it's Sao Tome or what. Do you know which citizen from which country was representing that country in the IA General Assembly? He was from Zambia. He had only 2 other people with him in the delegation. He was the one carrying the vote for a country. Yes. You know the gentleman. Yes. He was the one carrying the vote in Zambia, and he also abstained. So I know the abstaining and the way we do our diplomacy comes from Kaunda, and I'll tell you that I'm a very big fan. How can we revive that? Yeah, I know a lot of diplomats have been recalled, so we have a new batch probably that is going to go into foreign service. What needs to be done, Mr. Njapao? You are at NIPA. Very few people know that. That's where you do. Is it this? Where do they do in diplomacy?
Yeah,
we actually have diplomacy at NIPA.
How do we enhance, Bwana AMOS, how do we enhance that this is our ideology, this is where we are coming from, and it has worked in the past, and this is where we should go, and our diplomats should know that when they are going, this is our ideology.
It's political education, as I said, national awareness. We create what we call in communication some bare minimums. This is where we are in terms of this. This is where we are. It doesn't change the national projection of who you are. Doesn't change with the coming of one government and the departure of another. So it's training and retraining. The change of diplomats, naturally, even in the US, it occurs when the new government has come. There are mass recalls from the top, although in those countries mainly it's at a certain level. It doesn't matter who goes as long as they are trained.
And also it doesn't matter if we could have a strategy that lives on from one government to another.
You're watching Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. We are going to go for a short break, and when we come back, we start taking your phone calls, reading your messages. Continue watching Camnet TV, because Camnet TV is the best channel.
Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
We still need more players, yes, because we need to balance the team. We need to have maybe on one position 3 or 4 players.
The third Camnet Stars football trial is on. This time, Camnet Stars are looking for young, talented and skilled soccer players between the age of 18 and 20 years old. Start your lucrative football career in Europe this July. If you know you are one of Zambia's best gifted soccer players, don't waste your time. On Sunday, the 13th March 2022, there will be trials for professional soccer stars. Venue, Kablonga Boys Secondary School grounds. Time, registration 13 hours. Kick-off 14 hours. 100 kwacha non-refundable shall be paid, and your birth records must be produced upon registration. Camnet Stars, setting football standards for international market.
Hello, I'm Deborah Lukalu, all the way from South Africa. You are watching Camnet channel, not just another channel. God bless you. Stay tuned. We testify. We celebrate. For all you've done, Lord, we give you all the praise. Oh, we testify. We celebrate. Oh, Lord, we give you all the praise.
You are watching Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. I'm your host, Lubinda Bazoka, with me, Mr. Noah Njapao, and our guest, Mr. AMOS Chanda, very experienced statesman. Let me call him statesman, because a lot of people might not know what I know that he has done in his service. A lot of great things, and it's quite unfortunate that sometimes social media might twist things or tilt things to a certain level. But I know I was involved in a meeting where we literally saved the country in one sector. when the country was almost introduced sales tax. We are normally told that we have done nothing for our country, but I think God, God normally rewards and yes. Mr. Njapao, you had some thoughts before we went for break.
Yes, actually, when you were talking about the nuclear power plant, or is it a nuclear reactor? It's a power plant, isn't it? A nuclear power plant that was supposed to be built by the Russians, of course, with the help of other Zambians that were going to train at that point. I think it's discontinued. I'm sure.
Just hold your thought. We have the first caller. Yes, your name and where you calling from?
Yes, Doc. Good evening.
Good evening.
You are talking to Chishadwego, former of Vice President.
Viva, Monk, viva.
Viva. Good evening, Mr. Chanda, and the other host.
Good evening, thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Chanda, to say our politics are broken, and I think it's about time that we start redefining the Zambian politics. What was wrong under the PF regime is done under the UPND administration should be condemned. We can't keep on politicking. 5 years is a long time. We need to come together and keep the nation of Zambia together. Time for intense politics will come maybe in 2024, 25, and 2026. For now, we need to come together and keep the country together. The type of politics that we need to, for example, the opposition political parties, we can't be politicking all the time. We need to offer sound checks and balances to the government of the day. And to the government of the day, they need to be tolerant as well to what the people are saying out there and what the opposition political parties are saying. Because when President Akai they must succeed, you and I and every other Zambian succeed at the end of the day. If it doesn't succeed on something, then as a country we don't succeed. So I do agree with you, and I'm following the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a short comment on that. Actually, when I say the theme of our politics being broken as a cause of many things falling apart in the economic sector, I wanted to put one point again. In the 5-year political cycle, when the president has been elected, is a mandate clear enough that this president has won elections? Yes, he has. Should we oppose him as if he has not won the election and gotten the mandate of the people? I think no, we must. We mustn't. Should we hold him accountable to the promises he made? Yes. Should we question him about the things he said when he was in the opposition and now he realizes the reality of government? Yes, we can question him, but should we do it as if he has not been democratically elected? No, we mustn't. You can't have from August 12, when the new president has been elected, to August 13, 2026, politicking all year round. The polarization that will arise will make it impossible for economic development. Now, the question that people ask me is that he himself engaged in politics like that. Now, my point is that we must right the wrongs of the past by raising the bar, raising the standard. It's a controversial point because in politics, it's a game of politics. Sometimes the more things change, the more they remain the same. In an example that I will give, I'm advancing the cause of economic diplomacy, which is a subject of debate today. Traditional ceremonies are colorful, cultural festivals, not seen in other countries. Those are unique selling points. They project the diversity of this country, that you can have 73 or 100 ethnic dimensions and still live together in unity and diversity. When we package this and sell it to the other country will say, in other countries, 2 ethnic tribes can live together. But can you imagine 73? Then there comes in the Komboka, the Nchwala, the Uksesha Pangwe. Now, I'm saying the more things change, the more they look the same. If you look at the Mongo incident, or a traditional ceremony, and you look at the Nchwara, you think you are watching the same movie. But how can we make these ceremonies, for instance, as spectacles of national unity, where you can emerge stronger and more attractive than divisive? You know, I don't want to go into that. These are controversial. So these are the things that
Kamne TV under Pastor Chulba is organizing a football match between the PF and the UPND.
Excellent.
I hope that is going to be a success. We have a caller. Your name and where you calling from?
Lusaka.
Yes, your name, sir?
Yes, I'm calling within Lusaka.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, gentlemen, my name is PK Chewe. Yes, what you are saying definitely is very fruitful and very beneficial. You see, in the past, when there is one person in a family who is a witchcraft, in the past they used to come up with a very big fire and they throw the whole family into that. But when it came to say, no, I think some of the families are not part of this. They stopped. What I'm trying to say is that to bring somebody or a party or a club to say all of them are ABCD, that is very wrong. The other thing is, you see, this country is our country. If there is something wrong, that's why there are people, as you are talking, to sit down and look at the wrong and correct. Now, if you are doing a wrong and you don't want to be corrected, that's because you are in the position, or that's because you are a ruling party. It does not benefit anybody. This is our country. What you are saying, gentlemen, is very, very important. I wish people listen. This is our country. If there is something wrong, it's us to discuss. I like the way Paul Kagame said. He said, Africa, when we are affected in my country or the other country, don't go out and say anything. That is in-house. We have certain things that we can discuss as African leaders, and that is concluded. Now, if you say people, previous government, they are all corrupt, what picture are you painting to the people who want to go and get money or to be helped? You cannot be helped. There are certain things that we need to be, very, very careful. In Bemba, they say, Umukaramba mwene amakatayankaramo, ashikapo, so that the journey could continue. Not because that you will. But all what is done is to expose, to say, this is the danger that we are in. But wait on the danger. I think, gentlemen, continue helping this country, because it's worrying where we are going. It's worrying where we are going. It's like some people who think somebody will bring heaven on earth. No. It's us to make sure that as Zambians in all corners we are one. When people feel, not everybody do a story. When people are investigating, they cannot investigate everybody, even who is not even part of that. No. But when a wrong is done, let's correct it. We should not repeat the wrong. Even in families, let's not just say everybody did not go to school. No. There are some people who have never been to school, but they have got wisdom. And I think on this issue of saying somebody to be a president or whatever minister, councillor must take the vote, I think, gentlemen, look at it. In the constitution should change. Some people have never been to school, but they have wisdom. They can tell you in whatever local language, and things start moving. Please continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Basically,
Yeah, I think I can continue with my question. We were talking about the nuclear power plant that was discontinued. A lot of people talked about it, especially, let's say, the West. They said Zambia wouldn't handle a nuclear power plant. There were such sentiments. So there's, or should, well, trade agreements or trade agreements, should they only encompass economic benefits, or also they should also encompass non-economic economic elements such as national security?
Yes, precisely. And most of the time when governments, presidents, ministers are failing to explain in greater detail the economic benefits of one decision versus another, and this decision, it's because the element of national security. I've worked in government at the very high level. In most instances, it's taboo. For instance, if your life is under threat, as Ravinda was talking, and the minister responsible for national security, the Minister of Home Affairs, he decides how your life must be protected. If he deploys state protection around you, you cannot confirm, neither confirm nor deny that. It's taboo actually to discuss national security in public spaces. So a trade agreement that encompasses critical elements of national security will be explained in a manner where the president sometimes will get bashed, but he will not tell you the underlying national security aspect to a trade agreement. It is always there. When a trade agreement endangers national security, that trade agreement will not be signed. If it falls on the minister to explain only the economic side of that trade agreement and ignore the rest because it touches on national security, they are perfectly in order. And this has happened since Kaunda. It will happen in the PF, it happened in MMD, it will happen in the UPND, it will happen in a future government.
And you know, one thing that citizens don't know is that when you are near government, government communicates to citizens through its spokespersons or through even a private person. It can be an economist, an engineer. Go and say this because it's better it comes from you. These are normal things. So sometimes I would like to give you an example of the mining industry. The mining industry, people always hear me speak about it very passionate. The reason why the mining industry is very important, and very few people know that, is because that is a national security issue. How? 80% of our forex comes from mining. So if today mining companies just said we are not going to mine for the next 5 months, then you are going to only remain with 20% of foreign exchange inflows. What is going to happen? The kwacha will move from 17 where it is today to 50. Now what is that going to happen? It will happen, now prices will follow suit.
Yes.
Minimum, instead of it being at 160, it will go to 500. What will happen? People will stop consuming that minimum. They will stop, won't afford to buy minimum. What is it going to happen? There will be food riots.
That's the national.
What is going to happen? Food riots lead to a lot of things. That is it. Have you seen where it is coming from? So when I come and I stand and say some mines who are not going to comply with what government is saying should be nationalized, some people would say this guy is a lunatic. The message I'm trying to pass is to say there is that possibility. So can you continue mining? Otherwise, this unfortunately I have to say it today, maybe to educate people. But not on one occasion, on a lot of occasions, I've stood up and said a lot of things. And people will say this guy is down, this trend, that trend, but they don't know that there are things I can't tell you. And why have I come to say them? Because those cannot be certain things cannot be explained by government. My brother, who was my student, the current press aide, he was in the opposition. He would say a lot of things, calculations and all those things. I was very happy when he was appointed press aide, because he's a very sharp gentleman, very sharp. If you see the way he was speaking then and the way he's speaking now, it's two different people. Why? Because now we understand there's the elements that the citizens cannot understand. You know, some of us who can read things when a person is speaking, won't even condemn him. I think I've never condemned him ever since he came, because what he's saying, I understand it. Because he found the same problems. Some of those problems, even Kaunda had them. Not some, he had them. Because before independence, Zambia was a what? It was a village. We have never, this earth, this part of the earth has never been developed, its entire creation. We have never been developed before. You should not be lied to. So the structural problem that we have, they come from. I think AMOS is very experienced in. He would say something. I would just look. I said, for those of us who are able to read, I would say there's some elements he's not explaining. Yes. But as a citizen, that's why we say education is very important. It's very good government has brought in free education, because when the citizens become educated, they will be able to pick out certain things.
Yes.
That's why we are very passionate. That's why we are passionate to say, if a company says, I'm not going to deliver power, people will say, no, that's a private company. No, leave them alone. But what they don't know is that that power is going there. 60% of it is going to the mines. And when the mines don't have that power, they won't mine. And what is going to happen to the Kwacha? That's why sometimes we speak with passion. Sorry for...
No, that is very important, and I think without going into greater details to undermine the very things I'm trying to talk about, there was a time when there was literally an exponential decay, exponential collapse in the value of the Kwacha versus the convertible currency. And we looked at the food security situation intact. We looked at the patterns of the weather intact. We looked at the foreign exchange, foreign reserves. We looked at everything. So why would the Kwacha actually, why would we worry that the Kwacha would move from 13 to 16 within hours? Then it required to be said at a certain level. But the president said he would come in at a certain level, but there was consensus within the Minister of Finance, Foreign Affairs, and State House that it had to be said in State House, and it fell on me to say that. I had to call Governor Mvunga. He was Deputy Minister of Finance then, before he went to Secretary to the Cabinet, later on governor. And we looked at the fundamentals. They were all right. It became a national security matter, and there were rumor mongers. There were people who blamed businessmen, saboteurs within the PF, saboteurs from the opposition as engineering the collapse of the Kwacha. And certain intervention had to be made. The simple way that I said the president won't allow the collapse of the Kwacha is one of the symbols of the state. But this is a free market economy. Are you hinting at exchange controls? All I'm saying is that the president won't allow. There will be interventions of thought. The Kwacha stabilized. The following day Reuters did a story, not Reuters, Bloomberg, where they clearly misdirected what I said and said State House hints at the return to exchange controls. Misrepresented as I was watching the markets, and I was watching the foreign exchange market, and people feared that, in fact, when I said there would be an intervention, probably it would be exchange controls. They dumped the dollar on the market, and the Kwacha began to stabilize. As soon as this stabilized, my reputation was on the line, because I'm on the liberal side of things where I don't believe in state intervention. How can it be you, AMOS CHANDA, saying that? Having achieved that, I said, no, I think that there were going to be open market interventions through the central bank. And they will be, should the decay continue without any reasonable explanation. But the security services and other wings were probably what caused that. To our lasting shame, we discovered, me and Christopher Mvunga, that in fact the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Agriculture went into the market at the same time and bought off the dollar and caused that. So you see, a normal economic thing, because of rumor mongering and irresponsible sentiment against the economy, the Kwacha suffered. You know what it meant? we needed to raise a lot of, mop up a lot of kwacha to buy the dollar to service the Eurobond. We were on the verge of a default much earlier than you thought because of an irresponsible sentiment within the economy. So the role of citizens, private sector, Economic Association of Zambia, to answer your question, is critically important. What caused that was simply government agencies, without coordinating, going into the market at the same time. All it needed was one, the energy ministry maybe going into the market on the 10th and the Minister of Agriculture on the 20th, and there will be no such a problem. It's a small economy. So there are structural problems within the economy and within Zambian society and within our politics that causes also. So economic diplomacy to succeed, there must be continuous education, and we must see things as interconnected. When he talks about the mining industry, it's a mainstay. If things go wrong there, you are on the verge of a crisis. When an investor pulls out of the mining a sector like Mopani did, you see the state intervening very quickly, because those are the companies we call too big to fail. In the US, in the UK, nationalization occurs, but they use it, they call it through another, the government puts money in banks.
Bailouts, yes.
That's nationalization. AIG, it's too big to fail. Northern Rock, this is too big a bank to fail the state to move it. Lloyd's of London, it's an insurance company, it's too big to fail. The Prime Minister comes and says, yeah.
No, citizens cannot struggle. Let's give them $1,000 each.
Yes,
that's communism, by the way.
That's printing money. Yes, that's communism. They literally print money. But in this country, you make printing money sound like a dirty word. That's the role of the Bank of Zambia, is to print money as long as it's backed up by certain fundamentals, production, or a stimulus package. When President Biden literally
bring the 3 trillion, yes,
and personally called certain households himself whether they have received the checks. So there is need for consensus, as I'm saying, but that consensus, the condition precedent for that consensus is awareness, education.
As Julius Malema says, that economic freedom will lie
in education. Director, let's get some messages. Good evening, Doc, Mr. Chanda and Mr. Njapao. Thank you for today's topic and clarity from Mr. Chanda. Indeed, we need to disagree to agree. Knowledge is indeed paramount, and continuity should be embraced by all politicians and Zambians if development is to be realized. The discussion is very educative. Let's build and display an attractive Zambia. Thank you, Reverend Joseph Kaveya, Lusaka. Brilliant, AMOS, you have made my day. We need such knowledge and more interaction of such. It is for the betterment of our country. Keep it up. Honorable MD Mutete. Good evening, panel. Mr. Chanda, you are now sober and you created those wrongs, and you did not see those wrongs. Today you are speaking like an angel. No name. Evening, why did you allow or leave those fundamentals of governance when in power? You squeezed HH business, yet you are now over the top crying on debt. You were untruthful. No wonder even citizens can't know the country's debt. If anything, what's the country's debt? This is where we say we need education. Yes.
First of all, you need that without being rude to the contributor. Again, as I said, what you can't say to every citizen is the view you held in government. For instance, I was a spokesperson for the president. My views were completely muted, and that is the nature of the game. Now I'm an independent person. The views I spoke quietly in the room, I can now express them, and that's how it works. Even now, Anthony Boya cannot be allowed to pronounce his personal view because he's a presidential spokesperson.
Because when he speaks, it's like the president has spoken.
That does not mean what I'm saying now, I never voiced it. But at that time, I could not come to TV like this because I would be speaking whatever I have said today. If I was still in State House, they would say President Lungu said. So, what we are doing is part of that public education, political education I talked about.
Maybe people don't even know that we are really not keen on
the mist.
Yes.
Over time.
Yes, and that you squeezed the HH. No, I have been speaking to President HH for longer than he thinks. Yeah.
We met him in Cape Town.
Oh, yes, we did.
And we spoke.
So it's a facade. Sometimes when, it's particularly in October, you like to give this political example, and you are on the tarmac, and 100 or 200 meters away. When you are looking there, you see water, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a mirage that you see. That's the complexity of government, which many citizens don't see. They think that actually to be in the PF you are enemies with. No, it is not that bad. But let's assume now that I was wrong then. What's wrong with the correct position that I may hold today, assuming I was wrong? These are the disagreements I'm talking about, that there are certain basic agreements we must agree to say, look, these fundamentals are correct, these are wrong.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can still call us. So I think we'll have room for 2 more callers before we close. Mr. Njapao, your thoughts. We didn't give you time to say them.
Well, my thoughts centered around making trade agreements that are beneficial to the ordinary citizens through these engagements that we have.
You know, I've been watching Putin. So this gentleman in 2000 or 2001 met President Clinton then, 2000, and asked him, what if you allow me to join NATO? And there was no response. Then in 2003 he said, Ukraine cannot join NATO. In 2005 Ukraine cannot join NATO. 2008 can. Then he started saying, I'm going to respond. So look what this person over 20 years has just been speaking at the same thing. They have changed president, another person has come in, and what. When are we going to have a situation where we are going to have national interest? Like, I don't know our plan with the mining industry. We have a lot of maybe let me divert away from that. Let me move away from the Ukrainian issue. Let me come to our diplomatic missions. To send a diplomat, ambassador, costs between $80,000 to $100,000. I think citizens did not know that, but that's the price. Maybe below that, you spend about $80,000 to send and to retrieve, to recall, because you need containers. Most of them come with their vehicles, their household goods, and so on and so forth. Also, when they are there, you need to pay them certain amounts of money. I won't mention because I don't want people to go and line up at Ministry of Foreign Affairs tomorrow. How can we use the embassies to bring in investment? Because I will be very honest with you, I have had a lot of investors, some even coming from embassies I won't mention, who come here to Zambia and they are blocked at the ministry. That no, I would rather...
Isn't that part of the embassies to actually lobby for investments on behalf of the country?
Because the ambassador reports to the director at Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the way it is. So how can we maybe redo the whole embassy thing so that people are able to report even direct to their aligned ministries and their key performance indicators? You need to bring in so much investment into the country. I don't know, because we are spending huge amounts of money into foreign missions.
Scott, I must agree with you. There must be a cost-benefit analysis done, and I think that reorganization of our foreign service must be done. Basically, where we are lacking in the area of economic diplomacy, and I think that our foreign service must somehow operate like a business. We know exactly what we want from China. So we can give the ambassador targets. We must achieve the following. Or Zimbabwe last year achieved so much, we want you to be above that. It should be still civil service, but it must be business-like. We know exactly what we are looking for in Russia, the United States. In certain countries, I think, with the wisdom or the hindsight, we must just shut those embassies and redeploy where we can get the maximum gain.
As we wind up, let me see if we have some messages. If we don't have any director, then we can pick last remarks. Let's just see any messages. I think director doesn't have any messages. As we wind up, Mr. Njapao, your last remarks.
Yes, my last remarks on diplomacy, economic diplomacy. Let's use diplomacy to market our country and put it, paint a better picture or a good picture that could actually yield better results or bring in economic benefits. Those are my last thoughts.
Mr. Chanda.
I think we can't give up on the country regardless of who is in power. So there has to be that consensus that I talked about. And government must support public diplomacy in schools as early as possible. And the political education that I talked about, where sufficient awareness is made about what it is to be Zambian and what it is that we must project its competitive advantage on the international stage. We must be able to freely say, look, we dislike the intervention of the Russians in Ukraine, and therefore at the UN we are taking a stand. For instance, I do not approve of that kind of invasion. I understand the Russian feelings, the national security it poses. I can't imagine that the Soviet Union, Russia can be allowed to put up nuclear arsenal in Cuba. This is not the United States, but this is a country miles away from mainland United States. I fully understand. But I think that I never thought I would live in a world in 21st century and see a full-fledged war at the heart of Europe, with the potential for the escalation of a nuclear confrontation between major powers. I did not think that would happen. So with a small country without nuclear powers, with a super capacity in Moscow to see what we are seeing, I think I disapprove of that, and therefore I approve of those who are, I think the condemnation has been very clear, only 5-4. And the majority against. I think that it's not too late to try and occupy the country of 44 million people is a phenomenal challenge, I think. But the Russians know what they're doing, but I think that the window for diplomacy at the border in Minsk between Ukraine and we can still achieve that. I'm saying this because this is a major threat to the economy, not just in Russia and Ukraine, but Zambia as well.
For me, as we wind up, I think that a country like Zambia should take advantage of what happens in the world. During COVID, Tanzania did not close its borders to certain countries that love tourism. They received, in a space of 6 months, over 100,000 Chinese and Russians into their country, going for tourism. We now have sanctions. The world is basically being cut off into east and west, and of course you are going to see SWIFT this side and another system this side coming. Those we just embrace both. Yeah. When two people are fighting and they have mangoes in their pockets, and they give you to say, no, these mangoes are interfering with my fight, can you hold and eat? You just get them and eat them. And maybe, who knows, one day you are going to be bigger than the two people that are fighting, and you'll be able to stop the fight. You are watching Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. Our guest was with Mr. AMOS CHANDA. With me was my co-host, Mr. Noah Njapao. My name is Windala Zoka. See you next week. Stay glued to Camnet TV. Watch Camnet TV, because Camnet TV is not just another channel. Bye-bye.